Support for Lab Out Loud is provided by the National Science Teachers Association. Find out more at nsta.org. You're listening to the Lab Out Loud podcast, Science for the Classroom and Beyond. And today we're definitely going beyond the classroom into the brewery?
Beer is really complicated, so even in the best circumstance, there are just some variables that you can't control. Everything is intertwined, so if I'm changing something here, it's tied to, say 10 different things down the line that need to be in a certain level, and changing one tiny thing could have a drastic consequence on the final product of beer.
That's up next on Lab Out Loud, but first, I'm your co-host Dale Basler.
And I'm Brian Bartel.
And today, we want to talk about one thing we've set up new at Lab Out Loud, and it's a chance for you, the listener, to participate and contribute to the show.
That's right. It's called Patreon. And, well, if you've ever listened to Lab Out Loud and felt that it's benefited you as an educator, as a science educator, maybe you've played it in class, or maybe you listen to it for professional development, or just listen to it in the car to learn more about what's happening in the science education world, this is a way that you can help support us.
And we'd like to give a shout out to this month's new supporters, Christine Sullivan and Sarah Haran. A big thanks from Brian and I to both of you for supporting us and supporting the show. If you would like to become a Patreon, you can head on over to patreon.com/laboutloud. That's patreon.com/laboutloud and become a lab partner for the show. You can also find a link at our website, laboutloud.com.
And we definitely thank you for your loyalty and all of you that have listened over the last decade. And we're still going to be around. We just want to take it a little bit further and see where we can go in this next decade.
Exactly. Speaking of taking it a little bit further, Brian, take a listen to this. Do you recognize those sounds?
I do. In fact, I think did that happen this summer? Did we do that this summer?
No, it happened just a few weeks ago. Probably
a few
not
weeks ago was almost the summer. It was still the summer technically.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Seasonally, just because we're in school.
Hey, I only taught earth science back. Wait, never mind. Well, this is an interesting podcast because we're actually talking to someone who gets to have a drink, an adult beverage. It just gets to drink beer for work.
I did actually have beer early this morning, but not for breakfast. I had some food first.
All right.
Is that job related? It's just part of the job?
Yeah, it's part of the job. It's a big part of the quality process is actually tasting the beer, educated tasting of the beer and making sure it tastes good.
Very unlikely that any of our educator listeners are ever able to have a drink as part of their job. That's not the thing. But
and we don't encourage that at all by any means.
And we're not encouraging that at all. But the point of this discussion is that that there are science careers in every corner of our life, and this is one big example of that.
I'm Becca Ransohoff. I am the analytical chemist at Matri Brewing Company in Cincinnati, Ohio. So it's my responsibility kind of just for daily monitoring of the beer. So that's looking at raw ingredients, looking at beer, checking on fermentation, looking at packaged beer, kind of running tests to make sure everything is to spec. There's nothing that looks out of line.
Okay.
And make sure it tastes good, too.
And that's where the tasting comes in for your part of your role, then?
Yes, it is part of my job description, which I think is not in many job descriptions. But there are kind of three main tiers of quality in a brewing lab. So that is the analytical chemistry, which is mostly what I do, microbiology, so looking at the beer to make sure, there's nothing in there that is not supposed to be in there. There aren't any bacteria or wild yeast. And then tasting the beer. So looking at sensory, not only does it taste good, but are there any off flavors, what those mean. So it kind of can be a process control as well.
How is your role different than like a brewmaster?
Yeah, so they're related, but very different. So the brewmaster, I don't have any say really, or, in recipe development. That's mostly on the brewer side of things.
Okay.
But as a sensory panel member and being involved with our sensory program, we constantly are meeting to say, well, I think this beer could use more hop character, or this beer is a little too malty for, what we're going for with this recipe. So there's not we do like to do everything as a team.
Okay.
So we call ourselves a family. So.
Is a brewmaster sort of kind of like setting the menu sort of, and then, like at most small breweries, are they setting the menu sort of like what we're going to do or the direction we're going, and then the chemists help them get there, the scientists help them get there?
Yeah, so my main role is really kind of quality assurance.
Okay.
So making sure the beer is getting to where it needs to go in terms of, did we extract enough alpha acids from, is this beer going to be at the bitterness level that we want it to be? Is this beer, going to ferment to the point that, we don't have any of these residual sweetness in it, just making sure that everything in the fermentation process is going as well as we hope.
Sure.
But beer is really complicated.
Is it more like cooking, or is it chemistry, is it cooking, or is it both?
Yeah, so it is both. Beer is incredibly complex and has a mind of its own. So even in the best circumstance, there are just some variables that you can't control. And everything is intertwined. So, if I'm changing something here, it's tied to, say 10 different things down the line that need to be in a certain level. And, changing one tiny thing could have a drastic consequence on the final product of beer. Mm-hmm. So even though we've been making beer for thousands of years, there's still a lot of stuff we don't know.
Yeah, well, I think of a science experiment trying to be repeatable, and you have to essentially make the results of your experiment repeatable over and over again, because you have to offer the same product, right?
Yeah.
So how do you
developing brands is...
How do you come for drift? Like in that, do you have to like are there I got to counteract it or something like that, or is that part of the?
Yeah, so there's not much we can do while a beer is fermenting, realistically. Mm-hmm. But brand development is incredibly important, especially as Matri, as we're growing our size. Sure. I want to know when I order a psychopathy. That's our kind of flagship IPA. When I order a psychopathy today, it's going to taste like the psychopathy I had a month ago. I know what that beer is. I want to order that beer. So there are times that a beer is, we'll be aiming for something and something happens. Mm-hmm. And that's why we have a sensory panel. It's kind of like our last line of defense. And they'll taste all the beers to say, yes, this is to brand. There are no off flavors, like we'll release this beer, or there are no off flavors, but this beer is not to brand. We cannot release it.
Sure.
So there have been times that a beer has been totally fine, but we can't release it because, that's not psychopathy. That's not what our brand of psychopathy.
I would imagine that's a really stressful time.
Yeah, usually the quality meetings are very stressful time.
Well, that doesn't sound like that would be something you pour down the drain, but is it something slightly different then?
Oh, could you make a new beer? Is that what you're saying, Brian?
Yeah.
Sometimes we have done that. That's not kind of what we're ever hoping to do. But if there is a beer that, we have had as many many breweries around the world, if there's a beer that has issues, sometimes beer needs to sadly go down the drain.
Mm-hmm. How long have you been doing this?
I'm almost coming up to my year anniversary with Matri.
Beer-iversary, do they call that?
Beer-iversary. Nice. It is now.
I see what you did there.
Did you have other careers before this in chemistry, or have you always just set out to work in a brewery?
It has been enticing. I was actually in grad school for chemistry before I started at Matri, and got really into home brewing as kind of my escape from the craziness of grad school and just loved it, felt very passionate about it. And then was leaving grad school. I had my master's, and I knew I didn't want to go with any kind of traditional. I wasn't intrigued by any real traditional paths in chemistry, and felt really passionate about beer and decided to try and talk to a lot of breweries and convince them they needed to hire me as a chemist.
And you succeeded.
And I did. There's actually a lot of opportunity for science in beer, which is awesome.
Now, the Matri Brewery seems to have a lot of science sort of in the underpinnings of its story. At least that's what I was interpreting from the website. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so Matri started in 2013. There were 3 people that brewed together that, were very nerdy about beer, and started this company from the ground up. And right now we have 5 full-time lab employees that's in the quality lab. So that's kind of, for a brewery of our size, it's definitely a lot. We focus really heavily on quality at Matri. So, when there might be an issue and we have a meeting and I bring it up, and everyone will take it very seriously if I say there's an issue, or, the quality team says there's an issue, even if that means 100 barrels of beer have to be dumped down the drain.
That's really sad.
Sure.
It's really sad, but sometimes it happens. And,
sure.
There's not any, I feel very strongly that Matri values the lab's decision and is not going to release a beer that we say isn't up to snuff just because, they're losing money from it. So it feels really great to be a part of a company like that.
Do you have certain kinds of beer that are science themed? Obviously, you sent us Entropic Theory. Just as a little sidebar here, this is the second time that we've had beer mailed to us for the show. And if anyone else is interested in doing that, just contact us. No. Over 10 years, this is... Now, Matri was happy enough to send us a few cans of Entropic Theory. That's the one that we were interested in talking about. But as Dale mentioned, you have maybe some other lines that are science themed?
Just Entropic Theory for now.
Okay.
But there are future beers out there.
What caught our eye was the story behind Entropic Theory. One, about the name, but 2, that some of the proceeds or some of the profits from the beer are helping STEM initiatives. So can you tell us about that? Yeah,
so one of Matri's kind of core values is community. So our motto is beer builds community and community builds beer. So we are always reaching out to local charities and nonprofits and trying to see what we can do to help our community, be that at a very local level or, more national levels. So we have kind of 5 core charities that we support throughout the year. And then we're just always looking for smaller charities that we can help, whether that be, having an event in our tap room or just monetarily donate to. So Entropic Theory was really a collaboration between the lab and the brewers. And so we wanted to focus on the science aspect of it. And so we reached out to iSpace about collaborating with them for the release. So we, a portion of our sales for that day went to iSpace, which is a local nonprofit that provides resources to kind of excite students about STEM education. They have lots of programs and resources available to teachers and students locally.
I see.
And when I looked at some of this, there was also, you had some significant research behind making Entropic Theory. It wasn't just like throwing some things together and getting beer in the end, right? Not that it would normally be that. I'm not trying to suggest that, but...
Yeah. It was quite the opposite. We actually, so there was, we called it the IPA task force. There was the lab members and brewers. We'd have meetings weekly about this beer and how we wanted to create this new IPA. And, we tried this recipe and what do we want to tweak from it? Or we tried this, let's change this one variable and see how that works. And so with beer, you don't just brew it and get to try it the next day. You have to brew it, let it ferment, and then pack it, carbonate it and package it. So it is quite a long process. It took about 2 years and over 20 different recipe iterations to get to our final Entropic Theory that we released.
Tell us about the name.
Entropic Theory. So that is kind of the idea that there's this chaos on a molecular scale that, but you can develop a pattern at a micro scale as like zoom out. So you can kind of think of a mosaic as what we like to use as a more tangible idea. So you have all these broken shards of glass that look very unordered at a small scale, but as you zoom out, they form patterns and pictures and everything. So that's kind of the idea of entropic theory, and trying to capture the chaos of fermentation, which is definitely full of chaos and lots of unknown variables. And
do you have any plans to do any other types of outreach for STEM or other kind of science-themed beers?
Yeah, so we actually have we hired an intern from the University of Cincinnati to try and help, establish that there are different paths. You don't just have to go to school, go to grad school, get a job in, at a pharmaceutical company, and really just kind of, this is an ongoing thing that we hope to continue to try and outreach. We also collaborate with Miami University, which is a local college. They have a fermentation program, science program, and so, we're trying to partner with them to get real-life experience and looking at a brewery and what a brewery lab entails and all the issues that might arise at a brewery. So,
well, it really reminds people that, science, again, is it's everywhere. It's in that grocery aisle, right?
Yeah. I've learned, it's stress in my life. It's just a way of looking at things too. You can be formally trained as a chemist, but be very successful at many other things because it's just, you understand how to look at a problem at a way, not just at face value, but trying to understand like the depth of an issue. I think that STEM is really important in developing critical thinkers.
There must be a tremendous amount of biology involved here too. Do you, I know you're a chemist, but do you find yourself being a biologist from time to time?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Which if you had told me when I was in grad school I would have ever done something like that, I would have laughed at you. But yeah, there's lots of biology. I've had to bust out my old biochemistry books a couple times. So.
Mainly because of the yeast, right? I mean, yeast is a living entity here in the... Am I correct, Brian? Brian's the biologist. I was a physics teacher. I can only
say again.
It is absolutely.
Say again, that Dale.
Yeah.
I said, the yeast is the living entity, and then I was asking for your assistance there.
Well, seeing as you've been looking for the wheat beers lately that would have the actual carcasses of the yeast coming out, when that's what you've been looking for this summer, then yes, it is a living entity, or at least we have the effects of that living entity dying.
Gosh, it's such a morbid way to look at it. The carcasses of yeast.
Oh, and we have our title. No, just kidding.
I enjoy that. It's no. We actually, while we both love IPAs, we are both, I don't want to say fed up, but we're a little IPA'd out. It just feels like it's how bitter can we go? And
reaching our IPA LD50.
Yeah. So we've been enjoying a lot of other.
Is that chronic or acute?
It's fortunately we have plenty of other alternatives, and so we've been branching out to a lot of other things. And last summer there was a lot more fruity beers, and I don't mind that every now and then, but we need to branch out that way all the time either.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the cool thing is just there's so many people, so many passionate people in the industry doing things that you would never even think of before. And some of the stuff that's out there is, there's a local brewery that had a dill pickle goza.
Oh, goodness.
They released.
Well, and there's so many that have
cool stuff out there.
Yeah, they have local cultural kind of flavors or appeal for one way, one reason or another. And it's just, it's almost fascinating to just collect the culture of the beer that's out there right now. It's such a blooming market.
It reminds me of, we had a conversation with a person who's making CNC machines, and his take on desktop manufacturing and how it's expanding and causing more and more small manufacturing to happen locally. And I think maybe that's happening here. I just think of your comments about that, you don't have to necessarily have, this path to go when you're a biochemist, that it's only going to pharmaceuticals or something like that, that with these, I guess, small batch manufacturing or creation, or in this case, brewing, it's going to provide a lot of opportunities for, our future students and in different areas of the sciences.
Yeah, and just having that background and being able to interact with your surroundings and adapt, I think is just something I greatly value from my science education.
Mm-hmm. So, any of our listeners, will they ever have a chance to drink any of Mad City Brewing products, or will they have to travel to Ohio?
Yes, well, we're working on it. So originally, Matri was a 15-barrel brew house, so that means we can brew 15 barrels of beer kind of in one go. A barrel is approximately 30 gallons of beer. Mm-hmm. And we just earlier this year opened up a new $19 million facility with a drastically enlarged production facility. So we can now produce 126 barrels of beer at a time. And so the goal, because we were basically brewing 24/7 at our old facility just to keep up with local demand in Cincinnati and northern Kentucky. So we just recently launched markets in Louisville and Lexington and Cleveland. And kind of the hope is just as we break in this new space to be able to expand to other markets and, have other people appreciate Matri beer.
Well, fantastic. We look forward to seeing what you're brewing next, and good luck on your work with the IPA task force. I hope you have polos. It sounds official, right?
Deploy the IPA task force.
it was very official, but we did not have any official shirts. I'll have to get on that.
That should definitely be. You definitely need like badges or something.
Yeah, it's definitely a missed opportunity.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Becca.
Oh, thank you.
For links and other information related to this episode, visit laboutloud.com. You can send us your questions and comments at laboutloud.com/contact.
If you enjoyed the show, make sure you've subscribed on iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, or your favorite podcasting platform. And if you really enjoyed it, consider leaving us a rating or a review. Your feedback helps others find our show.
Until next time, I'm Dale Basler.
And I'm Brian Bartell.